Hey, thanks for tuning in. We are Living Fit, your trainer's trainer. We not only have education courses for trainers to upgrade their game, but we have full on follow along programs, workouts, exercise breakdowns, nutrition plans, and fitness equipment for you to reach your fitness goals. Now, enjoy the show. What's going on, everybody? Aaron Guyette, master coach of battle ropes and the education director here at Living Fit. And I have on the Living Fit show my really good friend and I guess sort of a partner in crime. He has invited me onto the cadre of several pretty fascinating things that we'll get into. His name is Jeff Depatie, and he was a Tier 1 Special Forces operator up in Canada and has since architected some pretty amazing and layer-filled things like the process and the trials, and now a long-range shooting course, all out of something called the Special Forces Experience. So, Jeff, love that you jumped on the show. Super honored to have you, and was curious obviously we talked a little bit about, some of these things, some of these projects, but what are you passionate about right now, and where did that stem from?
Well, first, ton of gratitude for having me on. I appreciate it all the time, and I can't believe you just rattled that off the top of your head. Way to go. Oh, passionate right now. I think in a nutshell, Aaron, if I was to boil it down, we could come down to one term: post-traumatic growth, which is new in the psychology realm, relatively new. It's kind of been poking around for maybe 30 years, but it's just starting to get traction and awareness with the new PTSD generation coming on. And I don't mean that lightly. As the awareness expands, it's time that we also become just as aware as the other side of the coin of PTSD, which is post-traumatic growth. And probably in a nutshell, where that comes from, if you really trace the genesis, childhood, I was always into doing hard stuff. I was fascinated with the other side of challenge, that potential, that elixir you can find on the other side of, whatever your challenge, whatever the underworld you go through as a little person. And then in my teenage years, it moved into, I think, really where, I don't want to say it starts like this for everyone, but fitness, keeping care of your body. The concept of stressing your muscles to be stronger and ready for the next thing has been around for a long time. And I think post-traumatic growth is the evolution of that, but on a more holistic, and I get it. Fitness has become pretty friggin' holistic. But from spiritual down to psychological, mental, right down into the fitness realm. When I say fitness, I'm just referring to, say, muscles and bones and ligaments and tendons kind of stuff. But the nervous system, everything, how you interact with people, how you face your trauma, your childhood wounding. I'd say that's kind of the nutshell. And at the moment, it's crescendoed right now. We're doing, I was just on the road for a few weeks, a documentary series. We're exploring the concept of post-traumatic growth. And what we want to do is lay out what we're calling a baseline, the event, and the post-event. And if you think of it as before, during, and after a traumatic incident, and trauma doesn't always have to be, worst case scenario. It just has to be something that's outside of your unknown. It's unexpected, and how to deal with that, how to prepare for it, how to move through it. And on the other side, how to metabolize it, catalyze it into growth. So you can expand who you are all the time in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And so would you say that your taste of that elixir on the other side of challenge and that trauma and being able to kind of stress your body and mind in ways to kind of prepare you for that do you believe that that's what drove you into the Army and then later into the special operations community, or was that a different avenue or route that brought you into that?
Part of my mind jumps to I got nothing to do with my route. It's the cookie crumbs you follow. Is it my genes? Where does it start? My culturing, my upbringing. I can
Yeah.
definitely say though, there was a taste for it. I remember very specifically being just a young guy. Oh man, preteen, and being like, oh man, I am thirsty for what I called at the time knowledge. Um, I think now expansion of consciousness or growth, or even on a more scientific realm, adaptive homeostasis, where you purposefully stress, all your tissues and cells, how they handle heat and cold, all that um, was very fascinating. And yeah, it's kind of hard to negate the cause and effect of like, well, if I want to keep challenging myself, where am I going to head to? If I'm going to climb that pyramid. And it just happened. I was a surprise, a forceful, aggressive young man. And fortunate for me, I did turn it towards special operations. And then, like you said, I headed up to a tier 1 unit there and kicked around there for a bit, indulging in these practices that through training, experience, tours, each one, I started to see how the little pieces that made me stronger for those next things. Yeah, if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So now I'm curious then, what research observation have you now been enriched more with? Has it been on this side of the special operations community where now you've been able to observe and sort of pour over some of the research and some of the concepts and principles? Or is it hindsight and remembering back and also, knowing what you learned in the special operations community, in the military, and even in your childhood? Which one is the deeper well, I guess, so to speak?
Oh, I feel like kind of taking the easy route and saying like yes and both and all, because I think that's in a way obvious, right? I would say my childhood, looking
Mm-hmm.
back on it, was perfectly molding me for at least a stint, maybe not a lifetime career in the military, especially in the special operations. I grew up in the wilderness, fishing, trapping, hunting, by myself in the wilderness with my dog, like that kind of thing, guns and King Saul. And I don't know why I was carrying around so much rope and, like just that kind of weird stuff. And my parents nurtured it too. They allowed me to explore boundaries a lot. I look back and I just think, man, you guys really gave me space to push this, and I hope I can do the same for my kids. And then maybe adolescent years, there's always trials through that, different kinds of things, heartbreaks and ups and downs and the law and stuff. And the military, this, she could be difficult at times. The military it's been hardening, strengthening, and evolving men and women for thousands of years. It knows what's up. It knows how to do that really well. So I cannot discount that. And then as I moved into the tier 1 realm, I was fascinated by oh man, like the ergonomics, the cybernetics, the every ounce of the way your environment and inputs can impact you and how you can in turn impact them. We use the term culture sometimes, and it makes a symbiotic relationship, right? The brain creates culture, culture creates the brain, and you can just grow and expand and get, faster, stronger, smarter, longer memory, more emotionally stable, able to handle stress more. So it was very fascinating then. But I would say that after I left is when I kind of like got to settle down for a second, because, I was in Canada, we're still part of the Commonwealth. So I was on the Queen's agenda, not my own. And when I left and we started creating the Special Forces experience in the process, now I got to take my lifetime of experiences, things I was seeking, and then, start putting together, as you mentioned, the cadre. And we started bouncing ideas off each other, lifetimes of experience merging together, and then put it into the process, into a complex event. And then from there, the observations continued, um, which continue to fascinate me. So, like I said from the beginning, I kind of just want to say, yeah, all of it. I would say that the last little bit has turbocharged it, though. Uh, some moments that catalyzed what I would call growth or the expansion of consciousness, or it goes by a lot of things, this spiritual awakening, it goes by many things, but it just started that thirst, and it's not just about my body or my mind, it's also about my soul and my organization, my community, everything around it. And I got pretty, it was catalyzed. I could say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously I've only, I kind of met you flash, real quick, in your kind of final time in the special operations unit that you were in. And I didn't really know anything. I didn't know you from Adam, and I didn't know really what you were part of or what that whole thing was. But then, in meeting you, obviously you are very intentional about, one, diving super deep into the research and observation, and really trying to understand this to create a very intentional and very specific product or process, I guess, right? To use the word, to define the word is maybe a bad choice, but right. But it is what it is, right? It is that thing. So, but then also just how, even in the last couple of years, like how well you do such a great job of letting the strengths of a particular person be that strength for that particular area. And know sort of when to step down and when to step up, and when to organize and when to talk and when to not talk. It's just very apparent that, yeah, if you said turbocharged, I would heartily agree. Now, unfortunately, I didn't know you in your childhood, and I feel like we would have become fast friends had I have known you, because I was doing the same, carrying around way too much rope for no stupid reason. But yeah, turbocharged, I think, is a great word, and also the research that we do now does tend to amplify or clarify a lot of the past, experiences, past observations in our lives. So let's talk a little bit about the process. What is the person, that wants to get into something? Like, who is this person that wants to get into this thing, and what do they get in the end, or what is the sort of the thing that they get out of this experience or this process?
Yeah. The word process is intentionally used because it's hard to describe certain things without using it. And then once it's like, it's a word we use quite a bit. So then it's, oh no, now it's in their head. It's in my head. So the avatar for this has always been a challenge. Because one, when it comes to marketing, I'm like, yeah, just everybody, so my wife, who does most of our marketing, has always had a challenge with that. The gist is men. And I'm telling you, I'm constantly, the spectrum of people who want to come out and do this amazes me, from young men, and I mean like teenagers, but their reason for doing it is one thing, up to people who have been in their 60s. And I'm guessing on, if you were to extrapolate those numbers, people even younger and older do want to do it. Women have shown interest. The gist, though, is men. Some of them, it's because on the surface, it looks very military. And in a lot of ways it is. Like I mentioned earlier, the military is fantastic at intentionally changing behavior. And I just thought, hey, what if we use those formulas to not dictate what their behavior should be, but give them an arena where they can come up against things that make them question their own behavior, or what I would say are fully accepted truths. That's ideas bounce off many people of like, yeah, you know what, if that wall is up in front of that person, this is what the expected outcome should be. So the avatar is kind of changing, because sometimes I'm like, man, I wish at 18, I was thinking in that headspace already, or, oh man, I hope at 65, I'm keen enough to do this. 65 is a little on the old side. I've had a few people try it. it hasn't worked out. If there is someone out there listening that is in that age bracket or older and wants to give it a go, there is plenty of opportunity if you're fit. But the gist, as you boil it down, it's people who, in a lot of ways, like me, were young people, young kids at a time, and they were seeking, they were, working on their mini heroes journeys. Um, there was a pull in that direction. I think there's a lot of warrior spirit, a natural courage, a courage for the unknown. Um, People who want to seek a deeper understanding of their personality, of their behavior on more traditional spectrums, something that's a little easier to read than some of the philosophical contemplations on what it is to be human, while also looking for, I like to think of it like this. So if you think of the brain as an atomic quantum structure, which, it very likely is, if we want to look at it in a reductionist way, if you think of it as a snow globe and you shake it up and move it from a lower entropy state to a high entropy state, I think it can allow for a perspective shift. It's not permanent. It's not like brain damage. I think it's less invasive than some of the drugs that are out there that people are using, like MDMAs and DMTs and ayahuascas and psilocybins. I think it's a little less. I don't want to call those toxins because I think they have their place, but to me, it's a little bit more natural. Men, in particular, and women as well, have been doing this for a long time. Climbing Everest, moving deep out of their comfort zones, the ascetics, meditation for weeks on a grain of rice, Christian pilgrimages. You find it in all the major philosophy, major religions, ancient Greek, anywhere you look, people have been doing kind of this similar thing. And then, of course, rites of passage came into play. I don't know when the original was. Maybe you do. If you do, let me know. I don't know if there's is that in the literature? I think it's been around for a long time. I think it's been around longer than we've been painting on cave walls. Because
I think so.
People had to be weighed at a certain point, right? You were part of a tribe, you were part of a small group, and it made sense. It's a logical step. And now with the process, I'm getting fathers putting their sons in it, so around 17, 18. And we've created a world that can look like it doesn't have a lot of hardship, like the old, Latin striving and struggle style. It does have its own difficulties. The modern world puts up a lot of, roadblocks, if you will. I won't go too far down that. But anyways, on the levels of, difficulty to find yourself, to bump yourself up, to polish those edges or sharpen those edges for life. So it's just, to go back to like a muscle movement, and we'll just take the bicep, for example, right? You stress the bicep so it can contract stronger. Your psychology works exactly the same way. The brain has multiple different areas that do different things, and you can function each one of them, and you can strengthen and you can detune. A lot of people right now are in what's called limbic overload. They're overwhelmed, especially coming off COVID. There's like a lot of fear state out there. So there's parts of their brains that are not nourishing, and this gives an arena to do that, to work those, and like I said, just to strengthen them. To you reach a certain point in your life. We'll take a 42-year-old man, went to university, paved his way. He's a professional. He's doing really well. He's got his family. He's got all that. He's worked. He reads. He learns. He does whatever his form of movement is. It's probably getting pretty complex at this point. Some yoga, qigong, CrossFit, battle ropes hybrid. And he's like, okay, how do I find that next 0.5%? Where do I look for that? And programs like the process, that's where that is, because I believe when you keep bringing these kinds of people together, I like to say none of us is as smart as all of us. And, through osmosis, we continue that learning curve. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I just was listening to a bit of Thomas Sowell, and that's like his major point, I think, in Knowledge and Decisions, a book that he wrote. Like, none of us is as smart as all of us. There are certain aspects and areas where some of us will excel and be very brilliant. But that doesn't mean we're smart in all the areas. So let's talk then practicalities for the process, because it's a multi-day event. It's at a particular location that's unknown, but there it's in Canada. So what if somebody's in the U.S. and then there's like these COVID restrictions currently, and softening a bit, but is that a foreseeable obstacle, and what's a way around that as an obstacle, if it is an obstacle, or if it's going to be an obstacle?
Well, I don't have huge faith in the government. They tend to usually move at a glacial pace when it comes to undoing policy. Well, really, when it comes to making policy, they do. But this time they panicked and, they did their thing. I don't, I don't see a lot of people signing up for this, and I don't want to, be too polarizing here. I don't see a lot of people signing up for this who get the vaccine necessarily. I see lots of people who think like this don't get it, and that's okay. And the only reason I mention that is because as of August, it sounds like American travelers can head up to Canada. But anyways, in order to deal with it, we're not going to run into that problem again, because we're hosting an event down in the U.S. in the spring of next year, so spring of 2022, April. Um, there will be some Canadians on it. Luckily, the American border hasn't closed down, and there's no quarantine or anything like that. Knock on wood. Hopefully that doesn't change. And then there's also going to be one in Canada in the fall. And the reason for that is it's not a segregation thing. It's because it already bit me in the ass once, having to, pardon me, turn away American clientele because the border was closed. So yeah, so somewhere in northern Idaho, like you said, you don't get to know until day zero, and then yeah, you go from there. So uh, we have we got about halfway full right now for our next American cereal, which is nice, and that's what I'm in the middle of, um, I guess, doing my sales thing for right now.
Awesome. And so then from the process, I know that I mentioned the trials, and so the trials is not this uh, multi-day, particular location, particular like in-depth experience, but it's still an experience nonetheless. I would like to get your perspective and talk on the trials and how it's not the process, but also how it's still utilizing maybe some of the same principles or concepts or layers. And yeah, I'd love to get your perspective on that. And then the listener is like, okay, I'm intrigued about the special forces experience thing, about this process thing, and then they get to the site and they're like, oh well, what about this trials? What should I do here? What is this?
Yeah, yeah. So at the specialforcesexperience.com, you'll see we got it kind of simply laid out. You got the process, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Then we have the trials, our ultra long range shooting program. It's an online long range shooting program, but really it's anyone who wants to shoot a rifle with a center fired cartridge and become truly proficient at it. And then a couple other things that are there, but really you land on the process and the trials. And the trials, it has lots of the same essence as you mentioned, but it's also an extension. And kind of funnily, like I just thinking about it when you said it, I think sometimes people find it harder. I think people have, men, maybe I'll generalize a bit, but they have a hard time digging into the past emotions and really starting to feel emotions and not bury them away. And I think that presents a different kind of struggle. And in a lot of ways, maybe even more healthy, because like the foundation of a house, if the foundation's not good, the roof's not going to be supported and all that kind of jazz, right? And it's the same with your brain. Emotions are lower down than rational thought. They don't bypass each other; they go through. So when people start tuning that up, it offers its own kind of struggle, but very much they're complementary to each other. Where with the trials, down the physiological channel, the psychological channel, and we bolted on sleep, nutrition, and then contemplative practices. You start to learn how to read into your own body and tune it up. Like I said, physiologically and psychologically, they don't exist separately. They're in tandem. And in order, I think, to have one be its best, the other has to be its best. And guys seem to get a ton out of it. It is a little bit more, presents more vulnerability. One day we'll come up with a more macho word for vulnerability. Um, and guys start picking away at things.
I don't know if that would be healthy.
Yeah. And when you're traveling in your psychosphere into the depths of your mind, it doesn't mean like everything is like these like awful childhood traumas, but I'll use a small example, and I feel like, oh my God, privileged white guy. Here we go. So when I was a young guy, I really think I had a great life. I really do. I had really open, nurturing parents. We were upper middle class, the whole 9 yards. And, I'm a bit of a late bloomer here. I found out, Santa Claus wasn't real. Okay, not really a big deal, but I felt betrayed, because trauma is relative. I didn't have, I struggled in the snow, I struggled in the bush, but it was very natural for me. And then all of a sudden, this weird thing happens, and not the most major thing that I could speak of, but I was just a young guy trying to make sense of reality. And now I'm like, oh my God, my parents lied to me for all these years. Like now looking back, it's like, well, of course, they were doing this beautiful thing for me, and the hours and days of joy with family. That's all just to say, you don't know what little things could use a tuning up, and especially when it comes, we're highly social creatures. Most of our brain is designed to be social and interact with people, and it's just better to do it on a healthy way, in a healthy plane. And one of the big reasons for the trials is so that people going through the process can actually process this stuff a little bit better, because they're going to go through something that no one else goes through. Only those men who show up will go through that exact experience. So, to chat about it, although the trials is offered separate for those looking for some awesome physical training, mental training, and then a little beyond. Some people get a little extra, some things they didn't expect. And that's about her.
Nice. So any tips? So if someone's been doing Marcus's kettlebell force program and then decides to walk over and do the battle ropes and kettlebell gains program or something like that, and then is like, oh, I'm totally going to do this. What would you give any tips? And I know you stay fairly reserved in this area, but would you give any tips for the person who's pursuing either the process or the trials, but more specifically the process, because there are so many unknowns in that? Would there be any tips on the fitness end of it? Not so much the psychological, but obviously I think that, like you said, they're tandem, they're inextricably connected. So when you're working one, you're also working the other. But yeah, what would you say to the listener if they're like intrigued and ready to pull the trigger?
So first would be really redefine your relationship with volume. It's one thing to do really, we'll say like even three, I don't know who's doing this, but 3 big wads in a day, and we'll even call them 40-minute workouts. Okay. Whatever your formula is, 3 of them. It's one thing to do that if you have sleep and you're well fed, and that's about her. So now extend that. And when I say volume, I don't just mean physical. I mean, moving in planes that you're not used to moving joints, holding things in positions that you're just not used to, going from light to heavy loads, and then compounded. To me, the process is really, it's much more psychological, because that's what's going to be happening. Your brain's going to be playing left and right. We're going to be pulling it up, down, all around. And so now you're on a volume level that you haven't been on. You're moving in ways you haven't moved. Be comfortable with that, because it's one thing to be very comfortable with the movement you're used to and then like really push it. You can still get a good burn, but then you go do like a weird thing like a crab walk or something, and oh, well, man, it gets really uncomfortable. And as soon as you get uncomfortable, it becomes more of the unknown, and your nervous system starts to be like, hey, wait a minute. And the idea here is you're fit enough to come in, but the more of those unknowns we give you, the more we stress that nervous system through psychology and physiology, the more tempted you'll be to put up your hand and quit. So yeah, redefine your relationship with volume, and I guess understand how fear manifests in yourself, because the power of fear used on someone can be very powerful. And um, how about this one here? I'll give a nice practical one. Breath. Breath is just about one of the last things to go, maybe bilateral eye movement or something like that. But when all the chips are down, if you can still breathe, and calm down that nervous system, that's a big one. Those would be the little ones. I don't like to give too much help for people, though.
Yeah, I was even surprised that you gave that much. So I appreciate that, and hopefully the listeners cherish that nugget. That, as small as it may seem, cherish that nugget. Yeah, it is interesting that breath is the thing that taps into the autonomic nervous system, right? And so yeah, it's such a important quality. It's funny, you meet people of all different expertise or all different parts of the fitness industry and whatnot, and the ones that are talking about breath, they're all saying very similar things, kind of like your talk earlier about the major religions, and how there's this through line, in the major philosophies and major religions. It's like, and I feel like breath is that, and it can definitely span out of fitness into psychology and all sorts of other things. Very, very
Family
interesting.
life.
Well, yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all the rigors and stresses and fears and all sorts of things that tap us on the shoulder day in and day out. Well, Jeff, we have a lot more to talk about. We're at our show's limit, but I would love to have you on again and chat even more. I want to know a little bit more about the long range shooting and some of the physiological components that are found in that long range shooting, because I know if I've known you in the layers that you create and all of the other things that I've watched you architect and build, I know that there's definitely layers in that. But how we finish every show is we ask each person, what is Living Fit to them? And not Living Fit the brand, but Living Fit the idea or the concept. And I would love to hear your take, your definition of Living Fit.
Yeah. Okay. I wish I would have known this, because I would have gave you a nice poetic answer. I think it involves a certain amount of balance, but for me, it's about, I really like the term adaptive homeostasis, where you intentionally stress certain factors, where you intermittently fast, where you take cold showers, but then you take a hot sauna now and then too. Or like I was running in the desert at, it was like literally 45, 105 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, a peak day, that kind of stuff. Doesn't mean you do it all the time. It's just every now and then you stress that, and it has a really good epigenetic outcome. Like you said, we're kind of getting going here, so I won't get into the depths of it. But doing that intentionally with all aspects of your body, mind, and soul, and I would say that's Living Fit. When you speak with people like that, when you see them, you're like, oh, that person is fit beyond just looking good on a stage. You speak to them. They have soul, they thought about a few things and they've been through some stuff.
I love that. Yeah, it's body, mind, and soul stretching. Well, and it goes back to your quest for now what you would call expanded consciousness, right? I love that. It's that, right? That's a beautiful, albeit not as poetic as I've heard you make things in the past. It is still nonetheless definitive, and I think a really good definition. So, Jeff, thank you so much. I'm really honored to have you on here and have you talk about not only your past and where you've come from, but now what you've been able to design to really just help humanity. And it's incredible. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I know it's a lot to stuff into 35 minutes. If anyone's interested, the specialforcesexperience.com. And really, thanks for having me on, Aaron.
Hey, for more interviews like that, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, if you're looking for not only those interviews, but follow along programs, exercise breakdowns, workouts, nutrition plans, and fitness equipment for your fitness results, make sure you hop on to Living.Fit, become a member today, and I'll see you on the next one.